What I'm about to share will not surprise our nation's most prominent Aboriginal leaders or advocates. And today I simply invite you to pay close attention to your own reaction when you learn of the following. Australia has created a multi-billion-dollar industry off the back of Aboriginal disadvantage. And if that sounds alarmist, I ask you to pay attention to your reaction when I share this. In just 1 year, $5.9 billion of our money was spent in the portfolio of Aboriginal affairs. I say the portfolio of Aboriginal affairs because it's important to remember that this money was not directed into communities and the people who have the most need. As a taxpayer, I ask you this. Do you have confidence knowing that this multi-billion-dollar industry is using money in a way that is misdirected? Do you feel like this $5.9 billion industry should be held accountable for not delivering the outcomes that are required? Would you be surprised to learn that very few of the schemes are evaluated properly? Take, for example, the federal government's initiative on Indigenous home ownership. It's designed to increase home ownership amongst Indigenous population. What if I told you that in 1 year, 75 loans were administered? Could you guess how many people were employed to administer those 75 loans? 75. Incredible, right? So when we ask ourselves the question, how is this model effective? What answers are we left to consider? Would your answer change if you knew that half of those loans that were approved could actually be delivered by a mainstream mortgage lender? So when we think about the numbers, all of a sudden, 75 people employed to administer 75 loans becomes 75 people employed to administer about 36 loans. There are thousands of programs designed in Australia under the purpose and with the intention of addressing some form of Aboriginal disadvantage. Unfortunately, just 100 out of every 1,000 programs are actually evaluated against those stated purposes. If that's the case, how can we be sure that they're working? And what can we do as Australians to make sure that the decision makers who are directing this money, and let's face it, paternalistic policies, how can we make them accountable? Why are we so compliant and so okay with maintaining the status quo of a multi-billion-dollar industry that continues to benefit on the back of Aboriginal disadvantage? I'm going to suggest that the mistake we make is also one that I've made in my speech so far. We've seen the issue from a very top-down perspective. Some may call this paternalistic. When we do this, what we fail to remember is that we also ignore people's stories. And in failing to acknowledge people's stories, we also fail to acknowledge their needs. My name is Dowell, and I'm a passionate advocate for addressing issues that negatively impact Indigenous communities. We do this in our work by looking at the complex business and social challenges that face our communities every day. We work with top business leaders, from ASX-listed companies to NGOs, and we work to partner with Indigenous communities to co-create locally relevant solutions that meet their needs and the challenges that they face every day. Now, I feel like I also need to clarify that I identify as an Australian, and as a woman who is also Aboriginal, from the Gija people of Warmun Community in the East Kimberley region of Western Australia. I am also equally proud of my father's heritage from Scotland and England. If you're wondering why I felt it was necessary to clarify that, it's probably got something to do with people saying things like, "You don't look like a real Aboriginal person," or "You're not black enough to be a real Aboriginal person," and my favourite, "Oh, you're one of the good ones," whatever that means. You see, those statements are symptoms of a much larger economic issue, not a race issue. And when you reflect on what they contribute to, for starters, they actually focus on our deficit. They focus on the deficit of people and communities. We also see other symptoms emerge. Symptoms such as generations of individuals who fail to recognize how wonderfully incredible they are. Resilient individuals. Notice that I'm using individuals as opposed to labels. I've had the privilege of working with over 500 incredible human beings, most who are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. These individuals not only want to lead positive social change in their communities and our country, but they want to be part of implementing it. Unfortunately, we do consistently see an epidemic of deeply embedded destructive beliefs. When you think about the average age of participants in our programs, we're talking about 18-year-olds. Now, if you were to take your mind back to when you were 18 and all the experiences that created and shaped who you are today, I want you to consider just for a moment the life of the 18-year-olds we work with and the path that they've walked. A number of these young people are children and grandchildren of members of the stolen generation. And yes, I know there's many people in Australia who want us to get over it. Believe me, no one wants that more than we do. No one wants to be born into a cycle of welfare dependency. No child is born saying, hey, pick me so that I can, have issues my whole life. No. We want to resolve intergenerational trauma, but we need to be able to do it as a collective. A number of these young people are also reminders of the potential that we can become. The wonderful thing about this story with these young people is at the end of the program emerges this incredible question. A question I believe is very relevant for us today. One that I want each and every one of you to reflect on. In denying parts of who you are you also denying parts of your parents, grandparents, and ancestors who paved this very privileged path for you to be in this room today? This is a question that I believe resonates with all of us, not just as human beings, but as a collective group of people who are capable of creating the change that we need to happen now. And I want you to consider your role in contributing to Australia's very public discomfort with investing directly in Aboriginal people rather than policies. We must reframe how we invest in people, and we must tip the model of investment in Aboriginal affairs on its head. But this is where the issue begins. And I can't help but wonder if this system is why this $6 billion a year industry continues to flourish. Is there any reason why you wouldn't want to resolve this economic issue? How much more effective could we be if we were just to take a moment and say, the solutions lay with the people? After working with over 70 organisations all around Australia, every role that's funded to help Aboriginal people comes with a long, long list of reasons why communities are at fault when results are not achieved. Shifting the blame disempowers everyone. And when decisions are based on assumptions about the capability of communities rather than the decision maker themselves, then we're heading into very, very deep waters with nothing left to hold on to. What I have found is that the results that are achieved when Aboriginal people and communities are at the table as partners rather than recipients fast-track outcomes more than ever. If you're sitting here wondering what you can do to get answers and results out of this multi-billion-dollar industry, I want you to consider some of these questions. If you're a leader or decision maker in government, NGO, or corporate circles, I want you to ask yourself how capable your team really is when it comes to creating solutions with communities rather than for them. And if you're an Aboriginal person, I want you to ask yourself what role you're playing to demonstrate that our capability is the key to our success, rather than what we're seeing now, which is a sense of entitlement. As human beings, we must stop and hold a mirror up to ourselves and ask what kind of future we're creating for our children and grandchildren. Do we want a country that's known for its ignorance and intolerance, or do we want to create innovative, intelligent, and practical solutions? Do we want to lead and impact our children based on our own personal biases, or do we want them to celebrate knowing the wonderful benefits of diversity? I leave you with this question, as leaders today and decision makers today. What purpose does it serve to continue benefiting from Aboriginal disadvantage? And who will change begin with, if not for us? Thank you.